What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Monte Poker. My apologies for missing you guys last week. We went to Las Vegas, play some poker and for a bachelor party, and I may have been strapped for time, so sorry for the no video with no notice. But now we're back and we have a ton of great hands to go over. This session is in my favorite card room. Once again, we're back at Outlaws, and since we went to Vegas, we saw some other card rooms, so it has a little more weight now. I am partial because it's my local room, but we won't talk about that. Anyhow, this session was absolutely fantastic. We had a bunch of swings in both directions, and overall, I feel like we played pretty well, give or take one or two hands. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. We started off the night picking up some premium here. We pick up pocket kings on the big blind. We bought in for 300 and still have 286 in our stack. There was a $10 open under the gun and a few players tried to just flat here. I'm gonna go ahead and raise it up to $40. This isn't a huge raise considering that there's a ton of dead money in there, but nobody's really raised this big pre-flop yet. So I'm hoping to get one, potentially two callers and get rid of the rest of the field. Under the gun does end up folding here. The action moves halfway across the table, and the more later position player, I think it's MP1, ends up putting in the fold. The button calls and then the small blind calls here. So we're gonna go three ways to this flop with 140 in the pot. Susie is a real one and keeps the run out pretty clean. 3, 5, 10 rainbow. I don't expect our opponent to have too much of this, so I'm gonna go really small here. I'm gonna bet 40 into 180. With this bet sizing, I'm hoping our opponent with call with any 10 that they may have hit the board with, or two face cards that are over the board. The 9 of clubs peels off on the turn, and now I'm okay just taking down this pot. We have 200 and some change left behind, and it's about 220, so I think I'm okay just ripping it here. I don't think the opponent has 9-10, which is the only hand that would be beating me here. Ace-10 will probably fold, and any two face cards are just gonna run away at this point. And the button does in fact fold, so we take our bet size back, and now we just have to play this heads up. 9 of diamonds hits the river. Our opponent mucks his hand, so we're good here. So we start off the night by winning a good sized pot. Our next relevant hand, we have ace queen offsuit on the button. I end up opening for 15 after everybody limps in. Almost everyone that limped ends up calling the 15, surprisingly. Then the board comes out king high. I make a C bet after the action checks over to me. We end up getting one customer who ends up shoving on me on the turn. So obviously our hand is no good here, and we just throw it away. Nothing special to see. And not too long after, I think literally two hands after the previous one, we end up getting ace queen again, and then open in late position, end up hitting a queen on the turn, and then bet at it, but no cigar here. Our opponent ends up folding, so we get back a little bit of what we lost in the last hand here. Back to the normal speed hands here. We look down at ace jack offsuit, my arch nemesis on the big blind. There's a limper under the gun +1, MP +1. The button also limps in here. I think the small blind is just calling while I'm looking at my hand one more time, and I'm gonna raise it here. I don't think anybody has anything too strong here since everybody literally limped in for 3, so we're gonna go $30, hoping to get maybe 1 or 2 callers at most. The early position player under the gun +1 ends up putting in the call, and then we have a middle position +1, yes, putting in the call as well. The button puts in the call, and everybody else gets out of the way. $126 in this pot. The board runs out king 10-5 with 2 spades. I'm just gonna go ahead and take a quick bluff at this. I'm gonna fire about 2/3 of the pot. I don't want to play this hand out of position without much to go here, so I'm gonna try to represent the king. We do have a gut shot and can potentially improve if we do end up getting a caller here. We don't really have much outside of that though. We just have ace high, and there's a flush draw here, so I really don't want anybody to call. 2 people do end up folding, and then the button ends up putting in the call. We do not like this at all. We need a lot of help, and help we get when the queen of diamonds peels off on the turn. Now, after our opponent called an $80 bet on the flop, I'm expecting them to potentially have king 10, potentially a set here. I don't think they're gonna call that on the flush draw, so I'm gonna try to target those hands and go for a bet size of 150. She has 300 and some change behind her. I didn't quite go all in, but it's virtually an all in because I only have 61 behind. Our opponent ends up throwing it away and saying nice hand, so I think she had a slightly worse hand than I had anticipated here. She did only come in for $3, so maybe king 10 doesn't make sense. Set of fives maybe makes sense there. Might have played this one a little bit wrong and missed some value, but if she was on the flush draw, we faded it, so a win's a win. Next hand, we pick up a jack 10 under the gun. Nothing too special here in a limped pot. We end up flopping an open ender, check it through, trying to check raise somebody, but nobody wants to put money in this pot, so I try to build it on the turn, end up getting one caller, everyone else gets out of the way, multi-way, doesn't really change anything, and then we end up just winning this pot with a pair of 10s. The next hand that affected our stack was a PLO pot. Forgive me for not putting the hands up on this. I still need to build the cards to fit 4 ways on the screen. Anyhow, I end up betting 35 with a flop flush. Somebody quickly caps the pot. And we end up calling here, and our flush ends up being good, so we scoop another good sized pot. All right, moving on to the next one. We have 559 in our stack on the big blind. We end up calling a good sized pre-flop raise with ace 8 off. Just because we were kind of priced in looking to catch 2 pair or better. Unfortunately, we hit our ace and I got kind of spicy and decided to lead out here, even though it's kind of a small ace. I'm doing this with malicious intentions. I'm going to set up a triple barrel bluff here with this card as long as the board run out doesn't get nastier. I was on the big blind, so it's very possible for me to have just flatted with a big hand like ace king, ace queen, considering the pre-flop raise would have had to have been massive for me to actually get everybody out of the hand, because if one person called, everybody behind would have called. Anyhow, we go to the turn here with 2 more customers, and a 6 of spades peels off on the turn here. It doesn't change too much on this board, so we're going to continue our story of having a big hand. I fire 150 into this pot here. The opponent in the middle ends up mucking his hand here pretty quickly, and then our opponent at the end of the table goes into the tank, and eventually he does put in the call with about 300 behind. So now I'm really worried because we're basically gonna have to get it all in, and this is where I make an absolute blunder. I fire out for 100 on the river here. 100. I think in my head at the time I was trying to put in a small blocker bet so he wouldn't raise me out of the hand, but thinking about it, like, I'm obviously beat here. I'm either going all in to just bluff and actually win the pot, or going check fold, or check back and we lose it showdown. It's jam or nothing in my opinion. I don't know what the heck I was thinking making a $100 bet into this pot, but whatever. And now we look down at Yama's cousin, Jack 9 offsuit. We're not quite suited, but one of them is a club, so I think that deserves cousin status. So there was a $10 open and I ended up calling on the button. The small blind ended up calling as well, and then we have a re-raise to $60 here. I was planning on just folding after calling the initial 10, but a couple of people called, and for some reason I thought Jack 9 offsuit was priced off enough on the button to see a flop here, so we also end up putting in the call. So we're off 5 ways to this flop with $303 in the middle here. The flop comes out 6 of clubs, king of clubs, queen of spades. Not really much to do on this board here. We have a gut shot and a jack high backdoor flush draw. To my surprise, the action ends up checking through and we go off to a free turn card that brings in the 3 of clubs. Now we have an actual flush draw to go with our gut shot. The original pre-flop aggressor ended up tanking for quite a while before firing a bet of $100 here. Everybody folded and I quickly put in the call. We're off to the river with 503 in the middle, which comes out an 8 of hearts. We completely brick out here, but our opponent announces check verbally, and almost as soon as the words come out of his mouth, we put the rest of our money in. At this point, he kind of looks down at his hand, looks back at me, looks down at his hand. It looks like he's gonna muck, but I don't know in what world you would possibly fold here for $90, even if you just have second pair. He slides the chips off of his hand, and I thought he was looking for a read as he was staring at me, and then he slowly starts to push the cards in towards the middle and says the following.
Oh my goodness. Bottom pair is good.
Not sure how we got that one through, but I'm absolutely stoked that we got it through. Nobody played this hand to a big raise pre-flop. I was a total donkey and just got lucky here. Next hand brings us ace queen offsuit in the cutoff. We keep picking this hand up tonight, and it seems to usually be with some red cards. Anyhow, we end up opening for $30 here. We go off to a flop multi-way, end up missing the flop, but the action checks over to us, so we're gonna make a substantial C bet here. I bet 80 into 120, trying to get everybody out of the way and represent a pair bigger than this board, and we end up getting it through and scooping up another one. We're off to another PLO Bomb Pot on the dealer change here. We end up having a lot of low little cards here. I end up pairing my ace, and then we have a gut shot to a 3, potentially pit a 4 for a boat as well. So we end up betting a little bit here. There's a couple callers building up the pot for us. The turn doesn't really help us out too much here. It comes out a 9 of spades. We end up checking. Our opponent caps the pot. I end up calling, and then the person to my left calls as well. We brick out, and they end up showing a set of jacks for a rivered boat. Me and the person to my left were blocking each other's outs to the wheel, so I don't think it was coming. Okay, another quick hand here. We pick up pocket eights, and there was a $30 raise pre-flop, and somebody was talking about pocket eights, and then I looked down at pocket eights, so we ended up calling just for the memes. But then we actually got a great flop with the gut shot and second pair, so we ended up leading out, got it through, and then showed everybody for the lulz. Moving on to the next one. Next hand is at the main table. We picked up king 10 and middle position and ended up calling a $15 open. We're playing this 4 ways and end up hitting top pair on this board. The action checks over to us, and we don't have too much room for improvement here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and fire a pot size bet. We end up betting 55 into 60, expecting to just take it down here unless somebody is on the flush draw. So when our neighbor to the left ends up putting in the call here, I'm definitely putting him on hearts. But then the small blind ends up taking for quite a bit here, and before eventually putting in the call himself. At this point, I'm putting one of them on a pretty strong hand, so we're off to the turn with 215 in the middle, and the king of clubs peels off on the turn. Somebody might be trapping here, but I don't think a set would have checked back my raise size, so I think my 2 pair is still probably best here. There might be a flush draw or an open ender on this board, so I'm going to charge them a good amount. I go for 175, making this pot about 390. So 175 into 390 is a little too big if I wanted them to chase it here, but we were also getting close to the end of the night, so I feel like a part of me didn't want them to chase it, which is why I went a little bigger than normal to actually make it worth it for myself. Got a little greedy here. Like I said, I'm getting up soon. I usually stop playing between 10 and 10:30 p.m. So with that in mind, I was kind of just trying to take this pot down and not have to worry about someone sucking out on me on the river. So eventually both opponents do end up folding, and we scoop this pot as well. Next hand brings us the pocket chickadees in the cutoff. There was an open for about 10 and a couple people called, so I re-raised it to a 65, but then unfortunately everybody ends up getting out of the way, but we end up picking up the dead money without risking anything, so that's fine. Final hand of the night brings us ace king offsuit on the button. What a fantastic hand to have on the button, especially when somebody opens for $30 right behind you. So I decided to go for an isolation play here, raising it to 100, expecting only the person that bet 30 to come along. If he has aces or kings, he's going to re-raise us. Otherwise, he's probably just going to smooth call and just see a board here. With that plan in mind, we were ready to see a flop, and then our opponent said this.
Ace
and a 7.
So as you heard, our opponent announced to put an ace and a 7 out there. So he pretty much told us what he had pre-flop, and then the board runs out 6, 5, 8 with 2 spades. I know this player is good to get money in the middle, so I could easily just, you know, milk this pot here and, you know, build it up because I know he's gonna call on his straight draw. But then he ends up leading out for 25 bucks. So we just call the 25 bucks. Queen of diamonds comes on the turn, doesn't really change anything. He fires 20, we call the 20, and then an ace of clubs comes on the river. We obviously have him beat. He fires out for 20 again. I call the 20. He shows a 7 of spades, so we flopped an absolute monster, and then we just, you know, scoop this. I know I could have played this hand differently and made a lot more money here, but I felt weird about it for a number of reasons that I'll talk to you guys about in a bit in the outro. For now, we're just going to pick up our profits here and cash out because we are up on the session, and then I will get your guys' opinion in just a moment. What a session. That last hand was a little interesting. I honestly could have played it better and gotten a lot more value, but I just felt really weird about the hand. Like, he literally told me what he had. I knew I could have made him chase the draw, but it's kind of like a moral thing. I think I had overheard some people talking about how he had just switched to some new medication and he seemed way more out of it than normal. I felt weird about abusing that situation, knowing that, you know, a poker's poker, he was on the table, and if he's putting money in the middle, he's putting money in the middle, but just something about it rubbed me the wrong way. I was already gonna win the hand, and I don't know. I wanted to get up. It was weird. It's weird. Alrighty, so looking at our stats, we bought in for 300 originally. We saw how that went. I ended up adding on another 300 after being kind of stupid with our failed bluff. Ended up cashing out a little over $1,000 for a total profit of 415, and the session was played from 622 to 1044. Pretty good return on our time. And then if we pull up our graph, we jumped up from being up 1795 up to 2210, so our total bankroll is around 2200, getting pretty close to our peak of 2306. So one more winning session and we hit a new record high. All right, everybody, you know the drill. If you made it this far into the video, make sure to like, comment, or subscribe. I will take any of the three, and I am not partial to one over the other. All right, everybody, I'll let you out of here. Thank you for stopping by. As per usual, I appreciate you guys. You have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Thursday. Take care.